Since its founding in 2017, the Oromo Legacy Leadership and Advocacy Association and Executive Director Sine, one of my constituents, has worked tirelessly to support democracy, inclusion, representation, and human rights in Ethiopia and globally.
And I personally want to thank the Oromo Legacy Leadership and Advocacy Association Executive Director Sina Jimjimo and President Ayantu Abdushiu for hosting this event today. I hope my pronunciation was close, even with my Minnesotan accent.
Yes, not all advocacy is lobby. Lobby is mostly specifically when you're trying to change regulations or policy.
No peace in Ethiopia.
No peace in Ethiopia.
Election yes.
Election yes.
Democracy yes.
Democracy yes.
Peace yes. Peace yes. War no.
War no.
War no.
To the Oromo, it is the Ganna which is important.
Achalu's work in music was actually the one that actually give us a comfort that one day this will change. But at the same time, it's also the one that disturbed the people in power at that time. And so that's the true nature of an artist.
And so Ero means a winner, a warrior.
This Lencha underlined. Lencha means in Afan Oromo Java or strong part.
For example, if I share something to Urji will probably share with 3 of her friends, her 3 friends will share with other 3 friends. So it continues moving on, it continues adding its value.
New York Times jetta, Washington Post jetta, Associated Press jetta,
always an appeal about it. What's ridiculous about Oromo things in Ethiopia is Oromo is not a minority. Yet, Oromo is still paying a completely controlled by the system that's actually not respecting Oromo people.
The Wallo massacre is real, and that is done by Amara militia that is doing genocide in Tigray. And this needs to stop, and this needs to stop fast. And the international community need to act on this. They need to voice their concern, and they need to take steps.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us. Welcome to today's policy discussion on Ethiopia at a Crossroads, 6th federal national election, parole or opportunity. My name is Sina Jimjimo. I am the executive director for Oromo Legacy Leadership and Advocacy Organization. Short name is OLA. OLA is an advocacy organization dedicated to serving the Oromo community, and we are fully committed to nonviolence movement. While we focus on Oromo rights, we aspire to speak for all Ethiopians. We have written several press releases on Gumuz in 2019 and Kamant, the minority group within Ethiopia. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram by simply /Ola Oromo, or you can just simply go to ola.org. This morning, my duty is simply to introduce our host, Mr. Cohen. As many of you know him by now, Ambassador Cohen is former Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. In 1990, He spearheaded the famous conference. The many Oromo accuse him failing to give opportunity. Make sure you mute yourself if you're not speaking. Accusing him to give him an opportunity, like he gave it, or at least they accuse him saying that they gave it to Eritrean to succeed from Ethiopia. While that fault is his or our fault, but today we are here and we have seen him speak way before many U.S. official, current or former. I want to thank Mr. Cohen on behalf of myself and in our whole team for taking his time from out of his busy to host this special conversation. I think we will use his wisdom and years of experience. Finally, since one of our panelists, Mr. Ipsa, was unable to make, unfortunately for being under arrest as we speak by Abiy security force, Allah have joined millions of Oromos to ask for his release of Mr. Dawood. On the other hand, that gives us little additional time to take Q&A, to take questions from audience. We do have already hundreds of questions that have pre-submitted. We have picked about top 10 questions we feel like relevant. We'll be posting that. After my introduction, Mr. Cohen will lead, and at the end, our Professor Girma will be making the final remark. I'll be assistant in between. With that, I'll pass over the mic to Ambassador Cohen. Thank you so much again. The mic is all yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm a big friend of Ethiopia since I got involved in the peace agreement of 1990, 1991, and I've been following things very closely. I think we have an excellent panel of experts here today to talk about the current problems. We're seeing a very strong military action in Tigray, and violence happening in other provinces of Ethiopia. And I think it's important that we understand why these things are happening and what are the possible solutions to it. And as an American, I'd be interested in getting recommendations as to what the United States policy should be to that, since I still speak to the US government, even though I'm retired. We have an excellent group of panelists today, and I want to start right off by introducing them. In our first panel, we have Mr. Thomas Hammarberg, Member of Parliament of Sweden. Mr. Hammarberg is, in addition to his role in Parliament, he has been serving as a member of the Swedish delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe since 2019. Prior to his appointment, he spent several decades working on the advancement of human rights in Europe and worldwide. He has been Secretary General of the Stockholm-based Olof Palme International Center. He's been Ambassador of the Swedish government on humanitarian affairs. He was Secretary General of the NGO Save the Children Sweden, and Secretary General of Amnesty International from 1980 to 1986. When Amnesty International received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1977, Mr. Hammarberg was the person who accepted on behalf of Amnesty International. Mr. Hammarberg, welcome to this event. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I think this might be a very important meeting, and I would just like to convey the very deep concerns that we have in my country when it comes to Ethiopia and what is happening there. As you know, the Prime Minister got the Nobel Peace Prize 1.5 years ago. And this was a moment when we felt that perhaps there was a positive movement taking place in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, of course, is a country with many Swedes being very loyal and very positive towards the country itself. There is a sort of friendship between my country and Ethiopia since many, many years. And that, I think, meant that when we began to get reports on what is going on in several parts of Ethiopia, in fact, and the violence that began to spread, and the lack of actions by the federal government to stop this development, on the contrary, perhaps even contributed badly to it, we felt that we need to take some kind of a position, and we are still discussing it. And one reason why I'm coming here is actually to listen to good advice on what we could do from our side, also in order to bring the cases up in the European Union. As you know, Sweden is a member of the European Union, and I think the time really is there now for us to take a more clear position and demonstrate what we mean by solidarity with the people of Ethiopia. So I'm very happy to be invited here, and I will listen very carefully about all the advice that we could get, and I will do my best to spread that to people in my country, but also to people in other European countries with whom we have a relationship. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Hammerberg. I just wanted to draw you out on certain issues. For example, when one looks at Ethiopia in general, not just recently, but for many years, you get the feeling that ethnic identity probably is more important than national identity. Have you seen that? Do you see a strong that possibly ethnicity is a more powerful force there than in other countries?
I don't want to be an expert when it comes to comparing between the countries, but to us it's quite clear that there are differences in Ethiopia today. And what seems to be unfortunate now is that this feeling of we being different from the rest is being strengthened and further developed. But I think also when it comes to attempts from the national government to use a policy which do not respect the difference between the regions there, that may even cause a situation where there will be further feelings among people that they do not belong to the country. So this is a very important dimension, and it's easy to make mistakes. And I think the present situation really means that gaps are created between the different districts and populations there in the country. So this is a major aspect of it, I think, in order to try to resolve the present crisis.
Yes, I agree with you. One thing that I was struck by recently, just in the last few days, you know, the government is now doing a military operation in the province of Tigray. And I've noticed that citizens of Tigray, or people who are ethnically from Tigray living in other parts of Ethiopia, are being harassed. Someone who's been living in the capital city, Addis Ababa, all his life, suddenly finds that he's losing his job because he's from Tigray. He has nothing to do with the present conflict. So the ethnic animosity appears to be very strong. And it seems to me that those of us who are looking for solutions have to concentrate on doing that. You know, for about 27 years, the leading political party of Tigray, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, controlled Ethiopia. They controlled the government. And they divided the country into ethnic states. But yet the people living in those ethnic states did not have any self-determination or any sort of independence from the central government. The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front tightly controlled all of these states, even though they were branded as ethnic states. So it seems to me that somehow possibly a new political situation could be developed there. But anyway, that's something we will talk about with our experts a bit later. I think maybe it's time for us to bring on our panel 2 experts so that we can get their expertise. Now, our speakers are Professor Marera Gudina, Mr. Ibrahim Aden, Ms. Abeba Teferi, and Professor Mesfin Ayenu. Why don't we start with Professor Gudina, who is an Ethiopian politician and opposition leader. He was chairman of the Oromo Federalist Congress, a political party representing the Oromo people in the scheduled 2021 Ethiopian general elections. OFC is a federalist and Oromo nationalist opposition political party in Ethiopia. Dr. Gudina began his college education at Addis Ababa University, but was imprisoned for 7 years due to participating in protests against the dictatorship of Mengistu Haile Mariam, who, by the way, continues to be living in exile in Zimbabwe. Professor Gudina, would you like to give us your views?
Ambassador, Professor Gudina seemed to have an internet problem because he's going in and out. And let's see if he just, here you go. Let me see if I can bring him in, but he's having his internet is acting. So maybe we can go to the next, our next speaker.
Sure, we'll get to Mr. Gudina a bit later. Mr. Ibrahim Aden is a senior member of the Central Committee of the Ogaden National Liberation Front. The ONLF serves as an advocate and defender of the human rights of the Somali people in the Ogaden region and is one of the 6 major political organizations participating in the scheduled 2021 Ethiopian general elections. Mr. Aden, how do you see things developing during and after the elections?
Thank you, Ambassador Cohen. On behalf of the Somali people in the Ogaden region, I would like to extend my gratitude to the organizers and panelists of this event. It is an honor for me to be part of this distinguished guest. To answer the question, how the situation is before and after election, at this point, I can speak what is happening, what is taking place in the country, and I'll be specific in the region that I represent, the Somali, the Ogaden region, where the election process or the registration process is completely not taking place at the moment. It's very unfortunate due to fraud activities involved or organized by the current administration, that the voter registration has been suspended at the moment. So the situation is not looking good, unfortunately. Our people have had high hopes in this election because they were expecting the first time in the history that they're going to take part an election that they anticipated to be free and fair. However, the registration process, the first step, is not looking good. The current administration in the Somali region is completely taking over the process where NEPE, the National Election Board, is supposed to be doing. They are looting and taking the registration cards. People have been intimidated. People have been arrested unlawfully or illegally. I mean, just so that they do not vote or rather support the opposition parties. So at the moment, the situation is tense. People are extremely disappointed. Political parties have been intimidated. So I think the situation is not great. We hope that things change. I know NEPE is taking some actions at the moment. They're taking some actions to correct the situation, but up until they fully correct the situation, we don't know how things are going to look like. After the election, it's hard to predict, but if things if things go the way they are right now, and the election is not taking place in a fair space, in a fair atmosphere, then the situation could be worse. You could imagine people who have been hoping for many, many years to see one day to vote for their choice, to choose the leaders that they want to represent in the political platforms. I mean, being intimidated or rather prohibited to exercise the civic duties, to vote for who they want, I mean, you can imagine how that that situation can, escalate, and it can cause situations that we cannot predict at the moment. But I mean, things are very tense, and that's what I would like to highlight at the moment, up until we get some proper corrective actions to and mechanism to ensure free and fair election process to take place in the entire country and in each region.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. What you just said reminds me, as you know, there's a significant colony of Ogaden Somalis living in the U.S. in San Diego.
Right.
And I became friends with some of them because I went out there to make a speech at the university. And I've kept and they tell me the story that when the EPRDF was in power and they had elections, in Ogaden, the people of Ogaden saw the results 3 days before the election. So it seems to me you're coming along the same pattern as previous. And it's bad news that it doesn't look like you're likely to have a free and fair election in your province, but probably in none of the other provinces as well. Anyway, thank you for your very frank contribution. Okay, can we go now to Ms. Abeba Teferi, who currently serves as president of Kemant Advocacy Group. Kemant Advocacy Group is an advocacy organization that focuses on the plight of Kemant that endured years of atrocities by the Amhara regional government. She said, being born from Kemant society, she has grown to be familiar with the prolonged gross violations of human rights and fundamental freedom, including genocide, arbitrary executions, enforced disappearances, displacement, illegal detentions and tortures, inhuman and degrading treatment, political and economic marginalization against the Kemant people in North Gondar. And I'll be perfectly frank with you, Ms. Abeba Teferi, I did not know about your group, and this is the first I'm learning about it. So I really welcome you to tell your story. Thank you.
Okay. First, I would like to thank the OLA Committee for organizing this critical event and Ambassador Cohen and providing me the opportunity to speak on the topic on behalf of Kemant people. I would like to present today the challenges of the current political system for the Kemant people and to answer the question of whether the 6th federal and national election in Ethiopia is an opportunity for long-awaited peace and social justice. Like many ethnic groups in Ethiopia, Kemant has been the target of political, socio-economic, and religious persecution of the decades, for so many decades. The issue concerning this region, located in northern Gondar, were further escalated in 2007 when the Ethiopian government single-handedly eliminated the Kemant identity from the census. The Kemant people were then forced to choose between identifying as Amhara or other. This simple yet catastrophic act by the Ethiopian government stripped Kemants of any and all basic human rights, citizenship, and the right to simply exist freely in their homeland, leaving them vulnerable to extreme violence and political and economic marginalization by both civilians and government-supported militias. The Amhara regional government special forces, sanctioned by the Ethiopian federal government, organized and armed local youth groups known as PANO or Gobezaleka to execute mass ethnic killings. The FANO and other local vigilant groups utilize non-mechanic violence to mutilate, castrate, impale, and rape, while the special forces use mechanized forms of violence ranging from 12.7 millimeter machine guns, PKM, bombs, snipers, recently mortar 81 millimeter. Since 2015, the number of Kemant deaths at the hands of the Amhara regional government has reached thousands. Homes, churches, clinics, farms, and businesses are being bombed and burned. Men, women, Children raped, burned, mutilated, and tortured publicly, and ashes are left where village once existed. The command people have been stripped of their humanity and have no access to resources to protect themselves. There are no clinics. They cannot go to seek treatment as the militia roam and guard the hospitals and threaten those who attempt to care of the wounded. They are being displaced by the thousands without any place to seek provisions of refuge. The ethnic cleansing enacted by the Amhara regional government, sponsored by the Ethiopian federal government, is not limited to the extent of its physical execution and erasing of the command nation, but the attempt to strictly dismantle their political power. The latest round of attack against commands began in April of this year in Aikal, Chilga town and surrounding areas, about 40 kilometers west Uganda. The Amhara Prosperity Party, formed in 2019 by Abiy Ahmed, held their election campaign in the town, expecting to receive unanimous support by the locals. The Command Democratic Party, however, which legally registered in the elections, campaigned and won the clear support of the local residents almost completely. As a typical of the Ethiopian federal government's campaigning procedures, the town of Aikal, Chilga, and surrounding fell under siege by not just Amhara special forces, but also the Ethiopian federal government and now Eritrean troops. They have cut all communication lines and internet, powers, water, and public and private transportation services. Much like Tigray and other regions of the country, the residents of Aikal, Chilga remain at the mercy of Ethiopian federal government, Amhara regional government, and Eritrean troops. The question we're here to answer today is whether the sixth federal and national election can be held free, fair, and competitive, and if so, whether it represents an opportunity for the peace and stability Ethiopia has been longing for. The reality is that Ethiopia cannot feasibly hold an election in 2021. In the midst of the chaos and violence ripping through the country of the Amhara Special Forces, Eritrean and Ethiopian federal armies, citizens in many regions across Ethiopia are under attack and siege. Villages are being bombed and mass murders have become a norm. In this state of affairs, Prosperity Party has used any and all physical forces and structural and political tactics to eliminate their competition, the supporters of the opposition, and to keep Ethiopians and the rest of the international community in complete darkness. As we have heard in Aikal Chilga and have seen in Tigray, the Prosperity Party does not tolerate the support of any party in their opposition. Political leaders of opposition parties are being targeted, kidnapped, detained, tortured, or have gone missing. Their members and supporters are met with the same fate. The federal government is ensuring their success in the upcoming election by casting large shadows over their crimes, by eliminating all independent media outlets, by excluding any competitive parties and their supporters, muting any independent sources of information. The Amhara Prosperity Party will become the last remaining active political party, leading to their presumed unanimous election. The issues are worsened by the ineptitude of the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, the government agency responsible for supervising the national elections. The board consists of 9 members, all of whom were handpicked by Abiy Ahmed himself. It is not surprising that with the violation committed by the Amhara Prosperity Party that the board would turn a blind eye and submit to the demands of federal government. In fact, postponement of the election in 2020 was not due to COVID-19 concerns, but rather allow the Prosperity Party sufficient time to destroy their opposing competition. We know this to be true because Tigray, who held their election in 2020 anyway, became and still remains the target of serious violations of international humanitarian law and human rights. Within this context, it is clear that the Ethiopian federal government and the Prosperity Party will stop at nothing to win the election. Therefore, it's my strong belief that this election is neither free, fair, and competitive, nor will it pave the way to a peaceful Ethiopia. Tigray as a state has been completely illegitimized and will be excluded from their participation in the election, while Oromo, Kamant, Agaw, Benshangul opposition parties and those of other regions across the country are being neutralized. I anticipate the outcome of this election will only result in more violence and destruction as the disinvestment by major foreign interests continues to increase and the debilitating repercussions of this for the rest of the Horn of Africa becomes a growing concern. Alternative to the elections, the answer to the issues is to release all political prisoners, conduct a national dialogue, bringing together competing political forces to forge a new political consensus. There is no feasible reason to believe the election and the environment in which it is being attempted in will serve a democratic mission. It is only with the support and pressure of those in the international community, guided by the opposing political leaders of Ethiopia, that such a dialogue can come to fruition. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much for that very frank discussion, and we'll take that very seriously. From what you said, I would say this may even be something for the International Criminal Court. Of course, I'm not an expert on that law, but I think they should definitely look at it. I see that Professor Marera Gudina has joined us, and he is he's an Ethiopian politician. I've introduced him already. So Professor Gudina, can you talk to us for a few minutes? Hello, can you hear us? Are you on mute? I think.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cohen. Yeah, I hear you.
Go ahead. We're listening.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can you hear?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Yeah, your name is very famous in Ethiopia because you chaired the days of Mengistu's regime and the assumption of power by the TPLF or APRF. Anyway, at least 5-6 points. One is how we came to this place where we are now. For the last 50 years that I know Ethiopian politics, we claim 3,000 years history. Anyway, for the last 50 years, the experiment we tried with imperial regime, it failed. The socialist regime, it failed. The federalist regime is failing, or it's already failed. And all these failures really made the Ethiopian transition a sort of a transition from crisis through crisis to crisis. So we are probably the fourth round of crisis we have now. All these crises, the source of all these crises is that the rigidity and the hunger for power by our leaders, from the emperor through the military leaders to mullahs, and now to the present prime minister. So because of this crisis, really millions of people have been displaced, millions of people became refugees, millions of people really displaced, killed, and sometimes through nature. So in fact, sometimes we say both nature and our dictators are cooperating against the people of Ethiopia. So our central problem is we continue to our journey, what we call on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of history. So still we are walking or continue our journey on the wrong side of history. But this is one. The other point is that especially the Oromia region, as you know, immensely contributed, really immensely contributed to the present change. We paid the lives of more than 5,000 young people. We paid really thousands, tens of thousands of people detained, including myself, a year in something. So really, the Oromo youth called Keros really contribute to the present change. But as soon as the present regime, a sort of an offshoot of the EPRDF itself, came to power, sidelined, pushed aside, and the clever people, especially city boys, surrounding the prime minister and the prime minister himself, we say stolen the change in the way put them. Those who immensely contribute to the change pushed aside. This is one. And then another problem of this being pushed aside by the present so-called leadership of the change. The problem is that from the beginning, the leadership of the change has mismanaged the transition by trying to pushing aside those who contributed and by bringing in people from somewhere, from whatever, and by imposing on the people more than 100 million of people that what we call a one-party roadmap, that really promote the interest of one party, the political whatever will of the one party, and almost what has been happening for the last 3 years is more or less what one party to promote one party's interest. We some of very few accomplish in so. Therefore, what we are facing, because of this, the Oromo Federal Congress, with our partners, we suggest at the beginning of the present change, the need for a common roadmap, the need for national unity government that could sponsor fair, free, credible elections that could be acceptable to all the peoples of Ethiopia. But the interest of the ruling party is to promote itself as a new ruling group, and frustrated all our demands, suggestions, advice for a common roadmap, and then lead this country, which has been really in crisis for the last 50 years, half a century. Then for the last, at the center of all this, our advice, our discussion, almost for the last 3 years, we have been trying to promote what we call an all-inclusive national dialogue, which could include also what we call a South African type of national reconciliation. But the ruling party increasingly frustrated our effort for inclusive national dialogue, frustrated all our advice, all of kinds, really to change course. And in fact, last year, as you know, what I usually call a divine intervention came in the form of the COVID, so that forced us to change the election schedule. And immediately we called the ruling party, in fact, submitted a 7-page proposal summarizing the Ethiopian crisis, the major pitfalls in this transition. And we called and strongly advised the ruling party to go for an inclusive national dialogues and not especially strongly warned not to go alone in its extension of the so-called terms of office for 1 year. The ruling party frustrated us in that. In fact, all these have been before the tragedy in Tigray, much more crisis in Oromia, in Benishangul, and then all over Ethiopia, including the Amara region. Our sister is speaking about the Kimant and North Gondar, in Gondar, and another North Shore, South Wallo, very massive devastation of people, days, destruction of property, and all kinds of things happen.
Professor Godina, excuse me, I have to interrupt you. We don't have much time, so let me introduce our last speaker, Professor Mesfin Ayenu. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Professor Ayenu.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Cohen. Let me make a correction. I'm not a professor. I'm a member of the Tigray Center for Information and Communication. I'm an executive member of the Security and Justice for Tigrayans in Ethiopia, and also a member of the Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars.
Yeah, go ahead. And we only have a couple of minutes.
All right. And I was asked actually to, I wasn't informed that I was going to speak, but I was informed that I would be attending the question and answer period. But nevertheless, I am going to share, because the topic is the election, the 6th election, I'm going to share my sentiments along with the rest of the group by saying that typically, Professor Amrara Godina had said that an election, a fundamental premise for election, at least three things must be there. One, it must be fair. Second, it must be transparent and credible. So you have free, fair, and credible elections. As far as I'm concerned, when there is a shadow of insecurity across the country, when there is violence throughout the country, almost throughout the country, and particularly when there is a massive war that has taken place in northern Tigray and in northern Ethiopia, in Tigray, for the past 6 months, with the intention of really decimating the people, their history, their resources, and essentially, one could debate the term genocide, but it meets all the standards of genocide that has taken place. There's insecurity even in the Amhara region. We've seen a devastation of properties and human lives in areas of Shoarwabit and so forth. And in the absence of a conducive environment for election, having this election is nothing, and really even to participate in this election is really giving a green light to a government that has shown nothing but any exercise of human decency, rights, respect of rights. So, for one to expect an election to take place in this environment will be a meaningless exercise of our loss of time and resources. I think the Professor Marara Godina has consistently for the past 2 years has made it clear that if there is going to be a peaceful Ethiopia, then there has to be a negotiated Ethiopia. There has to be a national consensus of a sort. And as you know, for us as Tigrayans, 4 or 5 months ago, the regional government has proposed peaceful proposals, and instead of responding this proposals. In fact, the Addis government, Abiy's government, has continued on the course of a devastating war. As you know, it wasn't just done by the Amhara force. I mean the federal government, but it has included the Eritrean forces. It has invited the Eritrean forces. It has invited and cajoled to the Amhara forces. So under this circumstance, for Tigrayans, there is no such thing as having a credible election, in the rest of Ethiopia, much less in Tigray, because even in Tigray, the election is not going to take place anyway. As far as we're concerned, our elections, we have undertaken our elections and established a government that is overwhelmingly voted by the people of Tigray. So I share the sentiments of the other colleagues in terms of this election being a sham election, that this election needs to have a complete turnaround. The focus should be really in terms of stabilizing the country, if at all, and really addressing the current crises of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just heard some breaking news on Radio France. They said that the Prime Minister has changed his name. He is now to be called Menelik XII. Just kidding. Okay. Okay, Sina, how do we do questions and questions? Do we have questions from outside this?
I'm speaking on mute, Ambassador. Thank you so much. But I wanted to say a few things. I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding. Mr. Ibrahim didn't know that was his 10 minutes opening remarks. So he asked if he could get a little bit of time so he can make a proper opening remark. And I do also want to say we have about, I think a little bit over 100 and something question pre-emailed to us. I emailed to you, Ambassador, a little bit late. We picked about 10 questions. There are also a few dozen questions, I believe, on live that people are asking. So we'll take some question at the end. We have a little bit of time. So what I would say is that if we can give Mr. Ibrahim to kind of make his opening remark again, and then we'll come back, you and I, and just take I emailed you that question, Ambassador. So let's just go through I'll say so. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Ibrahim, you want to continue? I'm sorry we cut you short. Why don't you go on?
You are on mute, okay. Okay, now you can hear you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. If you can all hear me well, again, I apologize. I was trying to be precise and to the point just to answer the question, but again, thanks for the opportunity. As the theme of this panel, the discussion goes, is Ethiopia at Crossroads. I would say yes, the political crossroad that Ethiopia finds itself in at the moment is not uniform. We are at different crossroads in different parts of the country. For example, the Somali region known as Ogaden is at a crossroad of opportunity denied. The opportunity is denied primarily by the regional government of the Somali state led by acting president Mustafa Mohamed Omar. The Ogaden National Liberation Front, ONLF, since resolving to pursue the democratic rights of the Somali people in the Ogaden, has left no stone unturned to ensure that the Somali region remains peaceful despite the presence of various political parties. In that context, the ONLF has been engaged in continuous dialogue with the regional members of the Prosperity Party, as well as several other opposition parties, with the aim of realizing free, fair, and unfettered election. On this, one thing that I can firmly say that unites both the majority of members of the Prosperity Party and the members of the opposition parties in our resolve to keep our region peaceful and to conduct free and fair election. However, things has become apparent that the regional administration based in Jigjiga does not share the aspiration of the majority of its ruling party members in the region. we have come to the determination that the regional president and small senior cliques who are megalomaniac seeking to hold on to power even at the expense of peace and reconciliation. This is a unique situation in that we actually believe the overwhelming majority of our people, regardless of party affiliation, want free and fair election in the Somali state or Ogaden, but it's the heads of the regional administration led by the current administration who seek to deny that opportunity for historic election, which would be the first of its kind in the Somali state. In short, the opportunity to make history in our region is being denied by those seeking a narrow selfish interest, even against the will of the vast majority of the Somali people, including their own party members. Just like other opposition figures have communicated with us, we have members and even some leaders of the Prosperity Party in the Somali region who do not agree what the current administration is doing. However, they cannot speak up. We don't want to reveal their names due to their own safety, but the goodwill is there among the overwhelming majority of the Somalis to give birth to a true democracy for the first time in the history of our beloved Somali region. It is not just election fraud that the regional administration is engaged in, as recently noted by the NEP Election Board of Ethiopia, National Election Board of Ethiopia, NEPE. It has deployed other tactics, including closing of offices of the opposition parties, intimidating members and supporters of the political parties, opposition parties, arresting anyone who's having any opinion that's different from the current administration in the region. When our members and those of other opposition parties are arrested for legal election-related activities, they are told verbally that all this trouble would go away if they support the current president and the current administration in the region. Now, what is ONLF position in this situation? ONLF is ready, willing, and eager to compete in free, fair, and unfettered election. We believe that under such circumstances, anyone elected, regardless of party affiliation, would be legitimate representative of our people, and we are ready to work with, but our principle is democracy over dictatorship. All parties must adhere to the principle of the democracy where the people have the ultimate authority to decide their futures and political representative without fear and intimidations. We have experienced struggle. We know what bloodshed looks like. We have gone through a situation where those in power in Addis Ababa commit crimes against humanity, against our people, and we have fought against it. We can remember the times of EPRDF dominated by the TPLF, how they repressed our people, and we have said no to their aggressions and intimidations. Yet we do not accept any further human rights violations taking place in our region. The ONLF believes that the largest single obstacle to free and fair election in the Somali region is the ruling administration and the current leaders in the region and their loyal team that they are surrounded with. Now, ONLF is willing to participate again in the election as long as there's a fair chance for a reasonable, credible election process. ONLF will utilize all available legal and political mechanisms to challenge the system for any acts that are against the rule of the law, the election laws, and agreed code of conduct. So we expect everyone who is part of this election, whether it's BB or any other political parties, to adhere and fully comply to the rules and the code of conduct that was all agreed upon. ONLF believes that there is a need for a genuine national dialogue that is conducted by genuine representatives of all nations in Ethiopia and government and communities, as well as political parties representing a single nation shall fill one delegation does not. Hundreds of parties from one dominant nation posting as multiple groups, battling a single outlook. ONLF believes in peaceful resolutions of all conflicts Again, ONLF believes Ethiopia is a state of many nations that were in conflict for almost a century. And the 1991 federal project seemed to be the best compromise that would have brought a workable federation. However, it was not implemented properly, and that resulted in a new cycle of conflict and bloodshed. The new changes in Ethiopia offered another chance. However, some quarters are trying to reverse the wheel of history and take back Ethiopia to a past that only brought wars, underdevelopment, and death. The only acceptable solution is to have a really fully developed national federation that is elected and controlled by the nations, not a dominant nation at the center. Finally, ONLF will continue and persist in peaceful negotiated approach to achieve its objectives and calls all parties and stakeholders to take that approach. As for the election status, we welcome NEPA decisions on trying to come up with corrective actions. However, our final position as ONLF will be determined by how NEPA corrects the flagrant act of the Somali state administration and the local BB who are trying to loot and take over the full control of the election process for their own selfish interest. Lastly, what is happening in the entire country, and particularly in our region, is not encouraging the bright future that the people expected. For instance, the Somali region, currently there is a huge process that the current administration is involved to arrest and detain anyone who has a different opinion from the current administration. For instance, for the last few weeks, there have been several elites, leaders, political leaders, and local leaders who have been arrested in Fiqh. I have a lot of names, but I don't have, with the interest of time, I don't think I'll be able to mention those. But just wanted to highlight that in every region, there have been several people that have been detained illegally. And all of these people, the funny part is, all of these people were not brought to court. No one knows where their whereabouts. They have been taken during nighttime, in the midnight. They were coming to their homes, taken over as hostages. I mean, there was no legal court orders that ordered these people to be brought to court. I mean, it's extremely disappointing and scary at the same time, because you can imagine people who have been in several years of atrocities and genocide just now facing another cycle of repression. This is not looking good in the region. Finally, what I would say is this time there is an opportunity where people can exercise their full rights to elect who they want. If that does not happen, we do not know where the future of this country will be. So with those few remarks, I would like to say thank you for giving me again the opportunity, and I'm looking forward for the rest of the time in this panel.
Well, thank you very much. It's very enlightening. I'm fascinated, the Somaliland, that was the colony of the UK, and Somalia was a colony of Italy. They both became independent at the same time, and within a few days they joined. But the difference in the way they were governed is just amazing. Somaliland is essentially a very democratic system. It's very open to the private sector and all that. Whereas Somalia is a prisoner of the clan system, and there's constant internal strife. So it's very interesting how the colonial past sometimes play a role. But anyway, Sina, I cannot access the questions. I apologize, because to access the questions, I have to leave the meeting. It's something strange. So could you ask the questions, please?
Yes, I'll do that. Okay, so I posted in a private chat 2 questions that we picked. There's about 150 questions we have, and then some. So I'll just pick the first one. This one was asked, and anybody can answer. It was asked by Beka Fayisa. The question goes, what is the long-lasting solution for crisis going in Ethiopia, East Africa, especially between Oromos, Tigray, Amhara, and Eritrea? Ambassador, I don't know who you want to direct this question. That's the first question, and I'll come back and read the second question.
Well, I think we should ask, we have an Ethiopian professor from Sweden here. Why doesn't we give him a chance? He hasn't said anything yet.
I agree.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. But I was actually expecting to have some final word at the concluding remarks. I think much has been said by the panelists, and which I'm very grateful for that. I think describing the main root of the problem, and also why this election is considered to be not free, fair, and election. So some of the remedies has been suggested, and which has been denied earlier and by Professor Marara Gudina, I think. The only way to solve the Ethiopian problem as a whole, and particularly also the oppressed ethnic groups in Ethiopia, is by having all-inclusive national dialogue. Because if we have to live in the same country, having diversified culture, diversified identity, and having a common country, there is no way to ignore the national dialogue, and also to draw a common roadmap, as it is said also. So what is really necessary is to have a peace, reconciliation, and a democracy at different levels. Between, if you consider the struggle in the south, in Oromia, the struggle in the north, in Tigray, and even in the Amhara regions and other regions, and there is no peace at all, and we need actually peace. Peace is a primary important what the Ethiopian people and all other ethnic groups are actually needed. So, and I think everybody should be ready to compromise, to listen to others' cause, to listen to others' pain. That's the only way I want to say. Sorry for my extended time.
Okay, thank you very much. Our second question is, what is the likelihood that Ethiopia will break up like the former Yugoslavia and form at least 3 nation states, the Republic of Tigray, the Republic of Oromia, and the Republic of Amhara? This comes from Muhammad al-Hashimi, Dr. Muhammad al-Hashimi. Who would like to answer that question? Let me see.
I think the MP from Swedish government.
Member of Parliament, the Swedish government, do you have a feeling about that?
Was that addressed to me, perhaps?
Could be, yes.
Could be. Thank
well,
you.
The breaking up of nation states is not something that should be done, easily. It's a major issue.
Yeah, hopefully. I think that the main message I bring from this meeting is the absolute need of a national dialogue, because even if they break away from one another, some of the parts of Ethiopia today, they are neighbors and they have to relate to one another. And therefore, I think that the attempt to keep Ethiopia together is very important, but that does require a national dialogue with respect for all different parts, all different groups in the country. It's a major challenge, but I see that as the least bad solution to this present situation, which in our opinion is a very serious situation. And we have to take this extremely seriously. I hope that there will be some more advice also on what the international community could actually do. The United Nations, the European Union, and other international bodies, what actually could be done from their side in order to not to be a party to the conflict, but really being of assistance to a real national dialogue.
I see. Thank you. I remember when we had the London conference in 1990, and it was agreed that there would be a referendum where the people of Eritrea could vote either to remain in Ethiopia or to become independent. And they asked me to announce this publicly. So we had a press conference at the American Embassy in London, and I announced that there would be a referendum and Eritrean people would vote after a 3-year cooling off period. And in the question and answer, one of the journalists said, well, what does the United States feel about that? I said, well, the people of Eritrea have never been given the option of deciding their own fate. They were put into Ethiopia by the United Nations because it was an Italian colony. Italy lost the war. It became a mandate of the United Nations. And in 1952, the United Nations said, you will be part of Ethiopia. And the people of Eritrea really had no way of deciding. So after the emperor abolished their federation with Ethiopia, they started a guerrilla war against the government. Well, anyway, the journalist said, what does the American government feel about that? I said, I think we agree with having a referendum. And if the people of Eritrea decide to become independent, we will support that. Okay, so I go back to the office in the American Embassy, and they said, Secretary of State Baker is calling you. I said, oh my, what did I do now? Anyway, he called me. He said, Ambassador Cohen, I'm very upset with you. I said, why? He said, you approved the possibility of Ethiopia breaking up, and that Eritrea could become an independent country. He said, now we are trying to persuade Croatia and Slovenia not to break up from Yugoslavia. And you're saying on the one hand, it's okay to break up a country, and on my side, he said the press is going to insult us. They're going to say, you speak out of two sides of the same mouth and all that. So, and he hung up, and I thought, well, I'm going to lose my job now. But 1 week later, I saw him in Lisbon. We were going to sign a peace treaty in Angola. And he said, you know, the press didn't even notice anything. So I'm okay. I'm not in trouble. But anyway, the idea of breaking up a country is a very serious thing. And sometimes it may be necessary. And as Mr. Hammerberg said, even if a country breaks up, you remain neighbors, right? And Eritrea voted for independence, but they're still a very close neighbor of Ethiopia. And what they do has an impact on Ethiopia. And what Ethiopia does has an impact on Eritrea. I'm just even thinking of the roads from the port of Massawa and the port of Assab. They're very important to Ethiopia, and they're in Eritrea. Anyway, we have another question, Seema.
So there are two gentlemen, Abiba and I think Mesfin would like to take a crack at this the first question, but we do have a lot of questions that I'll post. I don't know if you want to give them a chance, or I can post the next one.
Yeah,
Abiba, I want to go first.
Yes, thank you so much. The question itself is, Ethiopia has more than 84 nations and nationalities. So who decides that in Amhara region, there are a lot of, there are Agos, Demans, Oromo, Argobas, all this. What about them? What do we do with them? So it's, my question is to decide Ethiopia becomes free. To me, I guess that people need to decide once the negotiation started, then we can negotiate. Otherwise, just to decide three regions or countries to become that, we are the minorities who we call the minorities. What about that? So that's what I wanted to address.
That's a very important point, because even if you have independent countries, what about what goes on inside those independent countries? Are there minorities that could be deeply troubled by the new situation? So everything has to be studied very closely. Okay, Seema, we have another question.
Okay, so yes, I'll give 1 minute to also Mr. Mesfin, perhaps, and then I'll post the second question, the third question. I'll pick it up.
Yeah.
Let's see, Mesfin he say he want to take a crack at it. Mesfin?
Yes, I'd like to, but I think there is a question or a demand under there to allow Dr. Marara Gudina to say, and I will subscribe to that and concede to him if that's possible.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm lost. I went over there to get some of the question. Mr. Marara, I think you are on mute.
Yeah, unmute. Unmute. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, go ahead. No, you're muted.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
First let us deal with the elections. These elections are going to be sham elections. Especially it cannot produce the country's three greatest needs now. Those are durable peace and stability, the birth of democratic Ethiopia in 3,000 years, and to turn our face, our whatever energy, not to fighting, but to towards meaningful economic development. I think let us, at least for the time being, push aside the question of secession or disintegration, but the most serious need is to civilize our politics and to tell our dictators that it is better in the interest of the country, in the interest of all us, is to civilize our politics by engaging in national dialogue and an honest national reconciliation. To do that, the present election should be extended. The schedule should be extended, as it is really useless and not solving anything big. Secondly, but to do that, really, a lot of political prisoners in this country. For meaningful national dialogue, our political prisoners should be released very soon. And the other thing, really, the election board is increasingly becoming, the present election board, useless, partisan, and in the pockets of this or that party. I think it is also there is a need to revise this election board, which is unfit and really increasingly becoming partisan to the ruling party, and so on. And especially also there is a need to tell our government, especially from the major brothers, the Americans, the British, the French, and others, to tell our leaders that extrajudicial killings in 21st century is more wrong, morally wrong, legally wrong, and it can also take some of those who are committing to the Hague. So stopping extrajudicial killing is really very important. The other important thing is there is no military solution to Ethiopia's outstanding problems. We try to solve the Tigran tragedy with military force, the Oromo military force, Ugaden, or issue, or the Benishangul issue, or even some of the problems in the Amara region. The military issue should be put aside. Really, our leaders should be told in a language that they can understand, that the international community, especially the big brother friends of Ethiopia, cannot tolerate the solution of 110 million in the Horn of Africa that can affect the Sudans, the Kenyans, the Somalis, the Djiboutians, and really we are going to create a more chaotic situation out of the Horn of Africa crisis if our leaders are not really taking up the lessons, our historical lessons, very seriously, and start to turn around. And then instead of probably calling a demonstration that can burn American flag to really solve and fix our basic outstanding problems. You know, this present election is more than 50% of the country's population are going to be out of choice. Oromia is the country's largest region. Nearly more than 1/3 of the country's seats, or nearly 40% of the country's population. It is without choice. People is going to take all. Tigray is already out of the election schedule. Here in other Ugadan and others are the problems. Benishangul problems. In Amara, Kimantu regions are problems. If these are add up to, really the election is useless in the meaningless. Therefore, at the center of all these things is better to give at least 6 months extension or whatever extension, try to fix and our outstanding problems, especially to negotiate a common roadmap that can take our country forward. Otherwise, doing this or that is whatever is not going to take us any longer. The emperor failed, the military regime failed, the EPRF regime failed. I don't think any magic formulas which makes the present prime minister to succeed, unless otherwise we solve our problems more boldly, more critically, more in a better, whatever reconciliatory manner. Unless otherwise we talk, otherwise we stop killing each other, unless otherwise we stop it to creating new wounds. Already we do have many. Therefore, I think I suggest and strongly suggest that one or another Ethiopian leaders, especially some of the accomplices with Ethiopian leaders who are messing up this country, should come to their senses, and all forced to come to their senses. And I think here it is very important and critical. The big brothers help us in negotiating a fair game to all, not to one group, one group or two. A fair game to all the peoples of Ethiopia. That is the only way forward. Otherwise, for the last 3 years, consistently, the ruling party is frustrating any move towards a national dialogue, any move towards a common roadmap. It is the only dream of our leaders, or probably some of the people or advising or ill-advising them, is to hang on to power at all costs. That cannot work. That can, for the united and democratic Ethiopia. The solution, I think, one or another, lies in a united and democratic Ethiopia, which should come after an all-inclusive national dialogue, an all-inclusive national reconciliation. And without that, really, we are at a very critical crossroad, The Yugoslavia way is probably, possibility is not out of whatever. It is still a possibility. Even the Soviets, who had probably a military arsenal who could destroy this world, the Russian army was watching while the Soviet Union became 15 republics. And we know around what is happening around the Soviet Union. The peace they probably hoped for did not come. Therefore, I think the magic formula should be to tell our leaders. We had incident, just a minute. We were talking with OLF leader, OLF representative and other person at the British Embassy, to more than 20 diplomats representing more than 20 embassies in Ethiopia. In fact, one, I don't have to tell the name. One of the diplomats was saying, please wake up, people. We are talking about a crashing train, a crashing train. So I think we are talking about the crashing train. There should be one way to salvage that. That is really a real, honest national dialogue.
Thank you very much.
I'm finished.
You're finished.
Can I-
Okay.
Okay.
You know, Mr. Marrera, when I saw your name on the list as panelist, I called up Mengistu, and he told me to send you his warmest regards to you.
I don't know.
Mr. Mesfin, you had something to say. Yeah.
Yes, I had
I was in prison for 7 years during his regime. 7 years.
I had conceded to Dr. Marara because I wanted him to have. He is in the country, and then most of us are outside, and then he would have had the better. But just to address the question with the possibility of Ethiopia becoming another Yugoslavia is not a remote possibility anymore. It is absolutely a possibility because of its own inertia. If the government can pursues at the rate that it's going, nothing else, nothing short of that except really disintegration. And there we see that as a very possible scenario. Now, that's not to say, and I share the sentiments of Dr. Marara. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants peace. We aspire for peace, but the possibilities are there, and one needs to realize, and because of that possibility, then there is that sense of urgency the issue as soon as possible, because the way we see the polarized situation that we see in Ethiopia today does not give you really confidence whether or not people can have really had this desire, even some, especially if we are going to talk about the elite of the Ethiopian elite, the desire really to solve problems peacefully. And if people are not committed to a peaceful resolution of this, and especially the level atrocities that's taking place in Tigray does not give you confidence really to say, yes, we are part of Ethiopia, and that we will not entertain the idea and we are being pushed really to consider it, and it's not a choice. We are being pushed to do so. So there is a good possibility. I'm not going to guess who is going to be an independent Tigray or independent Oromia or so forth, but that's for people to decide. But the possibility is there, and I think the sooner we realize that there is that possibility, and the better we can probably address it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no more comments, we can go to the new question. How do you recommend that a movement amidst all the opposition can become more popularized? We've seen movements like Black Lives Matter and the Palestinian movement where there is solidarity all across the world. How can we as individuals do our part to create more awareness? And this is from Sarah McCoya. Who would like to talk about that? My comment is, why is it important for the outside world to become involved in the popularization of political groups and political movements inside Ethiopia? Seems to me you need to have your own, build up your own following, collect money, that sort of thing. I don't think it's important to popularize your movement outside of Ethiopia. Except if you hire me as a contractor, I'll do it for you. Anyone want to comment on that? Okay, let's go on to the next question. Indigenous media. What is the future of the distinct communities in Gambela?
Benishangul Gumuz and Lower Omo Valley if Ethiopia disintegrates, because these groups are culturally distinct from the mainstream. And I would add, what about the Garagi? What happens to them? You know, they've done so many wonderful things. Who wants to answer that question? How about Ibrahim, Mr. Ibrahim?
Thanks. I mean, first, one quick note about the first question about the polarization, and then I'll come to this real quick. I just want to say one thing. If people are denied the right of assembly and expression, then they will do every possible options to show their solidarity and react on situations on the ground. So any nation, any group of people that's been denied in the history, I mean, they have to find a way to express. So, for instance, I mean, and I think this is happening most all other regions, but I can speak up in the Somali region, in Ogaden. People are not allowed to assemble and express their opinions freely. What that is going to result is, if I cannot exercise and express my feeling and opinions inside the country, then I have to take it elsewhere. And that, where would that be? I mean, it could be anywhere in the world. I mean, so I just want to briefly touch that. If people are not given the rights to exercise their self God-given and the rule of law, that they can express their opinions freely, freedom of assembly and all those kind of stuff, then they would seek that somewhere else. In the next question of the future of distinct communities, I mean, if we talk about this, I mean, this is again a very interesting and very serious point, because first we want to know what is Ethiopia composed of. I mean, I think that's the first thing that we need to address. How many nations are in Ethiopia? I mean, is it only 3, 4, 5, 6? We know there are about 84 ethnic groups in Ethiopia. And what are the needs of all those ethnic groups? Each ethnic group is distinct and different from the rest. For instance, Somalis, I mean, majority of them don't even share with the language. I mean, in the rest of Ethiopia. I mean, so I think we cannot just pinpoint and pick few ethnic groups, whether it's Ahmara, Oromos, Tigray, or Gambela. I mean, we have to look at this as a whole nation and 84 ethnic groups that all speak distinct language, culture, and religion. So, and all of this, I mean, are feeling the pain, the oppression that has taken place. For instance, the Somali people, in the history of their existence in that region, in their region, I mean, they have been oppressed by any regime that has ever ruled this country in Ethiopia. I mean, starting from during the empire, coming back to the military and governments, and the last regime, TPLF and the EPRDF, dominated by the TPLF. I mean, the way they have been mistreated, I think there's no any other region that has been mistreated, because one, we've been cut off from the rest of the world. There's been no media allowed in that region. I mean, people have been arrested, women have been raped. I mean, so we're talking about every ethnic group in the country is feeling the pain within themselves. Whether how they're going to stay together or how they're going to be a part of, I think that is a question that needs people to decide, because I believe people have the right to decide for their future destiny. They have to be given that opportunity. In the history of Ethiopia, there has been no one time that any region in that, whether it's Ahmara, Somali, Oromo, I mean, that they've been given the right to decide what they want. For instance, our people. I mean, we were not even aware when we become part of Ethiopia, to be honest. Somali people, there's no I mean, you cannot find in the history a time where the Somali people decided to be part of Ethiopia or not to be part of Ethiopia. I mean, they have not been given that simple opportunity. So what we're saying is people must be given an opportunity to decide what they want. Let them decide their future. I mean, let somebody else not dictate for them what they want. Let them speak up. Let them choose who they want to elect. I mean, if I cannot elect in my simple member of parliament in the local region, if I cannot elect the person that I want to represent me at the federal level, I mean, how can I even decide, I mean, what I want? So I think the Ethiopian government has a history of undermining and basically, hijacking the minds of the people to think upright and fully exercise their God-given rights of deciding what they want. I think those are basic human rights. I mean, I have to be able, anyone in Ethiopia have to be able to decide their future destiny, their political representations, and where they want to be part of. So this is, I know it's a broad topic, is a topic that needs to be addressed on its own, but up until Ethiopian government realized the need for people to decide what they want, this conflict is going on, because will go on. Because once anybody is denied their rights, then they have no other option but, it will escalate to conflicts, bloodshed. That is not the best interest for anybody. So in summary, I'm not going to say one ethnic group or two or three, but this is a nation that composes of many ethnic groups, and all those ethnic groups must be given a space to think and to decide without anybody's dictating their future destiny. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm reminded of a conversation I had once with Meles Zenawi. I said to him, the government owns all the land. And so the farmer, he has a right to the land, and after he dies, his children can farm the land, even though it's owned by the government allows him to continue. I said, why don't you allow the farmer to take over the land ownership, and they could use that land to go to the bank and get a loan. They can improve things. They could have a farmhouse. They could buy good machinery and produce more wealth and then become wealthier. And so Meles Zenawi said, we can't do that, because if we give the land to the farmer, then some Amhara people will come and they will buy the land from them. And the farmers will enjoy that money for 2 years, and then they will lose all their money because they'll buy it. They'll just spend the money in any way, And then they will become serfs. They will become serfs working for the Amhara landowners. He said, we cannot allow that. So that illustrated to me this depth of feeling about ethnic animosities. And so I think what you're saying here is you're reaching a consensus about a national dialogue, which I think is long overdue. Okay, let's look at this next question. What do you think the roles of academics should be in order to come out of the political quagmire we people of Ethiopia are in before situations get even worse and impossible to reverse? The person who asked this question is Mulugeta Watabaji. All right, so we're going to an academic must answer that question. So why don't we have Professor Mesfin, you want to answer that?
For some reason, he seems to be, okay, here it is.
Yes, Ambassador Cohen, I insist that I'm not a professor.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're listed as a professor. That's why
I don't know.
So you're not an academic. Maybe we should.
I'm not an academic, actually. So that is why, and okay, I keep insisting. So that's fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead.
While the question may be directed to academics, generally, I think the academia needs to have really an honest introvert inner analysis really of their own, and really perhaps commit themselves to the rigor of the academics instead of playing political opportunity. And what we have seen in many of the academics in the Ethiopian academics is that from time to time they cater to political powers. They become stooges to whoever is at power. And academics, to my understanding, requires honesty, requires commitment to truth, requires a higher level of conduct becoming of that profession. We have not been able to see that in Ethiopia, and particularly in recent years. Yesterday, in passing, Professor Marara just mentioned that some of the intelligentsia in Addis Ababa, for instance, were talking about burning the flags of the United States. Now I think they have, but even the rhetoric that has been played for the past 2 years is really unbecoming of any academic. So I think if at all the academics is going to have the role of really playing a constructive role, then I think a serious self-analysis is required, and really commit itself to rigorous exercise of academic tradition. That we have not seen, and in the absence of that, I think then the role of the academics will become meaningful, and will not contribute to the role that it should have played to begin with. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ambassador, is your
okay? We have another question here.
Yes.
Okay. Why would the Ethiopian government negotiate? What would it stand to benefit? Clearly, in a free and fair election, the Prosperity Party has no chance. I see. Let me see. Who would be the right one for that? Mr. Ferry, would you like to answer that?
Yes.
Could they get elected? Could they get elected in your district?
Not a chance. But the questioner asked and answered his own questions. Yes. So they don't have any chance, so they should give up. There is no other way, because killing thousands and millions of people would not be a result. From the history of Ethiopia, like everyone was saying, Mengistu didn't last, even Haile Selassie, for that matter, fall. You see how the Haile Selassie regime fell, and APRDF felt that way. So the Prosperity Party, really, to my opinion, they do not care about the people. They care about the land. I heard Abiy Ahmed spoke that he was recruiting the children under 10 years old. So that reminds me of Hitler. So he's grooming young people so he can eliminate all the older generation or people who are against him and raise those people, and he thinks that he's gonna become king. That is not gonna last. So that's a dream. He can dream on, but the people right now, even though they're getting killed, they're fighting to claim, like the commands have been fighting for the last 14, 15 years to get even recognition of and self-rule under the Amhara region. They did not have a chance. They've been killed because of that reason. So because there is no other way except to negotiate. Actually, Ambassador Cohen, you said that it might be even looking the criminal court for those peoples, because including the prime minister, because we have seen what's happening in Tigray, the raping as a warfare, and in the command areas in Oromos. We do not even have the media, and no one is speaking. So, but we know individually that our people are getting killed and burned. Like I said, they don't care about the people; they care about the land. So, but that's not gonna last for a long time. It's not happening because people are fighting. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else want to speak to that question?
I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks again. For this question regarding, the election and how the political parties will perform and who's going to win and all this kind of stuff. Yes, when every political party certainly might say, "Oh, we will win," but the reality is determined by the people on the ground. And if any party has the confidence, or any government that has the confidence to win the election, probably would not react or take some actions that are against the rule of law. For instance, I would just get some quick examples in the Somali region. For example, what has taken place in the last few weeks, as NEBE, the National Election Board of Ethiopia, has noted and realized that there was a widespread fraud into how the election process or the voter registration process was handled. That itself shows that, the PP in the Somali region, for example, and I can't speak of in other regions because I'm not there and I'm not getting most of the details, but it could be similar. For instance, the PP in the Somali region knows that people would not elect them simply because of how they have handled and managed the region for the last 2-3 years. So for that reason, what they did was, before even the election, the voter registration was the first step towards the election process, and that should have been handled in a free and fair manner that gives the confidence of the people. What happened was, one, anyone who was assumed to be affiliated with any political party, any opposition party, was neglected or prohibited to take part in that registration process. That's the first step. Imagine. Second, what they did was every Prosperity Party candidate in the Somali region, for instance, was told, you know what, people will elect ONLF for sure. They're not going to elect you. So what you do is do everything that you can to hijack the process and loot and take over the voter registration. So we have cases, and actually, ONLF and other political parties, opposition parties in the Somali region, submitted all those complaints to NEPE with evidence, videos recording, where some PP candidates took piles and piles of voter registrations and rented storage, like 12,000 voter registration we're talking about. And their plan was, during the registration, during the voting process, they'll hire a few, young men or women, whatever they plan, fill out the forms, the registration forms, and do fraudulent fraud activities, so that they say, or just like rigging the elections, bringing the containers that they probably use for the voting, filled with those pre-filled voter registrations, pretending that people have voted for them. That is the extreme limit that the PP in the region is now conducting, and that's one of the reasons why NEPE, the National Election Board, has suspended the voter registration in the Somali region. So that's clear. That's apparent that the PP in, for example, in the Somali region, and maybe again in other regions, is pretty similar. In the Somali region, they know for sure that they have no chance that people will elect them, and for that reason they are doing everything possible to to fraud this election, to hijack the process. Instead of, what surprises me is, in every region or every district, there's supposed to be a representative of NEPE, a National Election Commissioner in every region. What is very unfortunate in Somali region is that those representatives from NEPE are not doing their job. Instead, the regional, the district chairman or the district leadership appointed by the current administration are taking and doing all those processes. That itself is illegal from the get-go. From the beginning, the process started illegally. It's a fraud that any one who's campaigning for the current administration to be part of this election. But I mean, it's pretty apparent, and that's why we submitted several videos, several pictures of the incident that has been taking place in our regions. And again, I guess the rest of the guests will probably speak in other regions, but I would suspect it's pretty similar. Thank you.
Can I add a few things here? Can I add? Hello?
Mr. Cohen, you're on mute. Mr. Ambassador Cohen, you're on mute. Let me unmute you. I don't know how to...
Okay, well, we're coming toward the end of our event, and since OLLAA works with the U.S. Congress and members of the European Parliament, the recording will be made available to all of these offices and as well to the public. So I'm asking each of our speakers to sum up, say no more than 2 minutes as closing remarks, and then we'll ask Professor Grima to do the final closing remarks. So who's going to start? How about Professor Gudina? Will you start, please? 2 minutes, please.
Professor, you're on mute. Let me unmute you. You're on mute.
He's muted.
Professor Gudina, you're still on mute. Let me see. You're unmuted now. Let's see.
No, he's not unmuted.
Professor Gudina, you're still on mute. You are still on mute.
Okay. Yes. No.
Okay, give us your... Yeah, you're okay. You're okay.
Can I go ahead?
Yes,
Instead of
go
losing
ahead.
the election, whatever, by the PP. I think the PP knows who well that, just one example. Last year the OLF, almost largest political group, and our group signed a meeting that we are going to field a common candidate, that we are not going to compete against each other, and so on and so forth. Two, we also toured the southeast. There's millions of people turned out, millions of people. So the ruling party declared the war against us. That was why we are forced out of the election and so on. I think PP knows well. It wanted to play the old game. The old game is using elections of during those days of Joseph Stalin, that you vote, we count, type of thing. And I think that is why the PP is declaring a war everywhere it can to win election. In fact, before the election, we also trying to team up about 10 major political groups, including the ONLF, AGO, and other grouping. And our group already called the Madrag. We have the Afar, the Tigran, the Oromos, the Sidama, and so on. We were counting about 350 seats in the parliament, and then the PP really panicked and declared the war against us. This one. Anyway, I think the Friends of Ethiopia, what the international community should do or able to do, or really if to salvage the Ethiopian situation, is what I said. I think the old games are not going to work. National dialogue is.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Professor Marrera, things in
the only way forward. The common roadmap for all of the people should be handling the problems. So it is in the interest of all the peoples of Ethiopia, in the interest of even settlement, a political solution for the choices are as far as they control the guns, but the guns are not only controlled by only one group. That is why Ethiopia is really messed up. I think the international community should help us using the donors' leverage to help us to negotiate a way forward with a new game is needed, a democratic Ethiopia is needed, and otherwise the option is Yugoslavia.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ferry, would you give your closing remark?
Okay, again, thank you for hosting this very important program. I call the international communities that Ethiopia, in most parts of Ethiopia, genocide is taking places. Ambassador Cohen, the fact you, at the beginning of this meeting, you're not even aware of about Comanche genocide tells me something. The information, that's how much it's hidden, so not to get to the world. So we have a responsibility, the international communities, either as individual or as a communities. History will write as a right that how we saved humanity under our watch, or we were part of the contributor by doing nothing or saying nothing. So I call the international communities to get really involved and do what they're starting doing for this reason, to save our humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next panelist, Mr. Ibrahim, would you sum up in 2 minutes, please?
Okay. Again, thanks, Pastor Cohen. Again, this was a great discussion. To summarize, first, I would say national dialogue is a key. If we need a lasting peace, a national dialogue is a key. Free and fair election is also a key, because people must understand and feel comfortable that they can elect who they want, not who was appointed for. I mean, technically, there is an election and there is a selection. What we see in most of the parts, especially in the Somali region, in Ogaden, is a selection, not election. I mean, the current administration in power is selecting the people that they want, and they're forcing people, I mean, to accept those people. That is not how election should be. Election should be free and fair. People should have the choice of their political representative. Also, I wanted to highlight, there is an arbitrary arrest going on right now in the Somali region in Ogaden. That must stop. I mean, elders have been arrested, political party leaders have been arrested in midnight. I mean, not even daytime, midnight. I mean, I don't know if that is, I can't call arrest. It's more like a hostage. I mean, keeping people in hostage. So I think that must stop. Those kind of intimidations is not going to resolve or help any political party. My message to NEPE is NEPE must take the full responsibility to control this election process for it to happen free and fair. If that cannot happen, if NEP cannot take that responsibility and make sure that this election should take in free and fair election space or atmosphere, then I do not see the reason or the point of even calling election. Honestly, I don't see the point of calling an election if the agents or the government agents that was supposed to handle this in a way that's free and fair is not able. So again, NEPE has a role to play. Complaints reach the desk. They have responded partially in some of those complaints. We expect a full response and full responsibility of this process. We cannot longer watch the current administration electing themselves, handling or managing the election process where they're supposed to be part of any other candidate. You know, there should be any other candidate, not them managing the process of elections.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we have to move on.
Thanks.
Okay, Citizen Mesfin, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Thank you for that reference. Yes, I do. Under ordinary circumstances, I would probably share every sentiment that was expressed here. My concern is today it's not an ordinary time for us as Tigrayans. We are in a state of war. 5.8 million people of our people are under a threat of a famine. Thousands of our women, young and old, have been raped. Thousands have been arrested, killed. Our youth has been slaughtered. And massive slaughter has taken place in all parts of Tigray. Today, Tigray is actually under the invasion of the Eritrean forces, the Amhara forces, and the federal forces, actually. And under these circumstances, for us, the elections are a luxury at this point. Today, our priorities are to make sure that the international community has demanded this, that the Eritreans withdraw from Tigray, the Amhara militias and Amhara forces withdraw, and the federal forces withdraw, and the rebuilding begin. And that is our immediate crisis. Today, we need unfettered access to humanitarian access. We need really a serious, independent investigations of what has taken place in Tigray. The war crimes, crimes against humanity, and bordering really genocide. As far as we're concerned, that meets all the standards of a genocide. So under these circumstances, I'm sorry to say that elections have become a luxury to us. It is a discussion that will have to wait until the future time. And our colleagues here, we hope, and the international community in general, will support the resolution of these problems under the conditions that we have set aside just now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll ask Professor Grima to do the final closing remarks. Professor Grima?
Mr. MP have not did his mark, Mr. Thomas Hamburg.
I think, yes. Yes, Thomas Hamburg. Yes.
Thank you. Extremely enlightening, actually. And the mere fact that the issue about breaking away from Ethiopia by parts of the country today, I think is a warning that something really radical has to take place in order to avoid something that may be even more disastrous in the future. And so I think it underlines how important the difficult the situation is today, how serious the human rights violations are. What we just heard about Tigray and the situation there tallies extremely well with the reports that we have received. And this is a very serious situation. massive violations of human rights, basic human rights. And there, of course, the international community has a role to play. When it comes to the outside and Ethiopia itself, I do not think that the outside world could really resolve all the problems. This has to be done by the Ethiopians themselves. But the international community could contribute or be of assistance to the situation. And that is what we are seeking to discuss and try to find the means to use in order to give a contribution, an important contribution. And there, of course, monitoring of elections is an important part. In several countries in the world, one has managed to avoid violations of elections and distortion of elections by having international people to be monitors during the election. And that may be something that should be discussed in this case as well. And thereby, afterwards, there is a need of really going through what has happened during the last period of time when it comes to basic human rights violations. And there, of course, we have international standards which needs to be respected. And therefore, I think there will be a need to have reports worked out in order to bring to the international agencies, including, of course, United Nations, in order to try to draw the lessons from what happened. And if there have been really, and that seems to be the case, basic violations of human rights, there is a need to keep someone responsible for this.
I think that's very wise. That's a very important statement, Mr. Hammerberg. Thank you very much. Professor Girma, would you like to sum up, have the final say?
Yeah, please just allow me to thank you very much, and especially the last remark is the most important concluding. I would like to thank Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Cohen, for the excellent chairing of the conference, and also member of Swedish Parliament, Mr. Thomas, for the excellent presentation and final remarks. And of course, all other panelists, Ms. Ababa Tafari, Professor Mara Godina, and Mr. Ibrahim, and Mr. Masvin, and of course, for the excellent preparation and supporting all the time, and even making possible for this forum is Ms. Sena Jechimo. From my observation, I think the main focus is actually peace and democracy, and for the people, and for that purpose, all inclusive national dialogue is one of the key words forwarded, and which is necessary, where all stakeholders are included, including the international community, to bring the international experience of making peace. And then I think the reconciliation is the other important key points which was mentioned. And finally, even to run an election, there should be some agreement among all stakeholders, among ethnic groups in Ethiopia. And today, I think with this forum actually reflecting the Ethiopian problem, starting from the north to south, and in the center also. So such forum is very, very important. It is actually part of the dialogue, and we are propagating for the dialogue, and this could be a piece of dialogue, and this should continue. And allow me once again to thank for the organizers, and also for those who have taken part as a panelist, and also as chairing of our seminar. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all very much. I thought it was an excellent discussion. It took us a long way to better understanding. And I think we're on our way to finding possible solutions. So thank you all. And I will say goodbye.
Goodbye.